meeting to order. It's a workshop of the City Council of Fort Walton Beach on Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. If you have a cell phone, if you please turn it off or put it on vibrating, that would be much appreciated. And we can get right into it. Item 2 is the discussion. And the first item is 2.1, Charter Amendment number 1, compensation to elected officials. And I'll open up to Ms. Cobb, City Attorney.
Yes, sir. We had a meeting about these charter amendments a while back where we went through all the details in the staff report. So we were going to let the council take the lead on it, but if you all have specific questions or need me to go back through the background again, I'd be happy to.
All right. So, questions for Ms. Cobb from council?
Yeah, just real quick too, Mayor. I think maybe last time we discussed these, it was all, we were kind of talking about all three of them at one time, so it got kind of jumbled. And some of the council requested to put them on there separately, as a separate item, talk about one at a time, just to make it a little bit more clear.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are talking about number 1, which is the compensation to elected officials. And again, open for Ms. Price, go ahead.
I haven't changed much from last time. First, I want to start by saying thank you for all the people who had all the hard work getting all these petitions going and all this started. And I think this whole meeting is what's led to the results of the last election, why the people spoke and voted. A lot of us are up here, and hopefully we can get a lot of good stuff out of this workshop. I feel like every time we've had a workshop, we've been able to converse freely and really get some good results out of it. So I'm hoping that comes from this one. As far as Charter Amendment number 1, I don't support it. I didn't support it from the beginning. I don't really want to support it now. I don't want to see it go on a ballot and then have to waste staff's time and money to put it on there and then try to convince people not to vote for it. So hope it doesn't make it on there, but if it does, I'm going to be against it from day 1.
Thank you, sir. Other comments from council?
Sure, just not knowing how we were going to go through it, but that makes sense. I've been conflicted about it as well. I can go back to the time that we were in the watch group and the early start of where that came from. You know, in the first days of the watch group and what we were looking at in it. My recollection of it is, and some of you were part of it as well, but it was us looking at a budget item specifically related to insurance budgeted for council. And if I remember correctly, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $26,000 per one of us up here was budgeted. I had to look at, Jeff, what is the budget this year for council's insurance?
You have that from you, Cole? We got the budget right here.
So you're about 127, 130, about 130,000, which includes, no, 127, dental, life, and health.
Does that include the mayor?
Yes,
Not Jeff?
not Jeff.
Jeff's down. So back then, just thinking out loud here with you guys, back then we were like, well, how many are taking it? Because we knew there were some retired military officers up here. Some had other insurance and everything. And so in my mind, it kind of, I've looked at it's similar to the budgeting for positions that we don't feel that the money just goes back into the general fund. So that was kind of where it started, was we were setting aside $130,000, but maybe only 90,000. We never knew how much of it was actually being taken by all of the members. So it came about insurance and the premiums that were associated with it. So the compensation that we get up here is what, $400 a month?
430, something.
So, you know, and I know we all work at it different ways and everything, and I'm with you, Bryce. I don't know that, if it was a paying job, it would be worth a whole lot more. But the beginning of Charter Amendment as listed compensation for elected officials was related to the insurance premiums for us. So I know that we're on the next meeting, we're coming up some insurance. Terry's bringing up some insurance stuff here. we're getting ready to go out into the bid process, and I know that we've asked for, different ways to look at it, whether it's raising deductibles, changing coverage or something. So, maybe that's something that can spread across to the compensation or the insurance package up here that was as part of elected officials. So I've been kind of against it. I said, I've talked with several former council members about it, and I said, if it were up to me, I think this would be a paying position. It would be based on how much money we save taxpayers. And that if we don't save taxpayers any money, we don't get paid. But what's going on up here is we're spending taxpayers' money like crazy, and we're still getting a little bit of compensation, $400 a month plus the insurance. So anyway, that's just my thoughts on the compensation for elected officials. I want to see it go on the ballot, and I can appreciate that, Bryce, that maybe it takes up more time for it to get there or whatever else. But I want to see it go there. It came from the watch group. Let the citizens decide what happens to it. I think if I was a citizen reading it and going, no compensation, anything, I'm not for that. So I think it's dead in the water when it gets there, but I still want to see it go on the ballot so that we can hear from citizens that confirm that or deny that. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Schmidt?
Ms. Kopp, you feel pretty confident once the summary ballot language gets right, they're legal to go referendum?
Yes.
After that's done, would anything different have to be corrected with Mr. Lux's office for it to be certified and to go to a referendum? Anything different?
Do you mean in the actual language of the proposed amendment?
Yeah, after we finalized the proposed amendment and it was summarized in compliance, anything different need to go through the supervisor elections office to get certified to go on a referendum?
No, we would go through the process. We would prepare an ordinance with the ballot language and summarizing the amendment. It would have public hearings, two public hearings here at least.
Gotcha.
And then we would pass it on to Paul Lux. It would be translated into English and Spanish. He'd put it on the ballot.
So nothing we need to change, no additional petitions we need to go out. All right, so I guess with that being said, I mean, it has triggered a referendum. Let's get it legal and let's get it to a ballot and put this to rest.
Gloria?
I agree. I'm not for being compensated. I declined all health, dental, and the above. Terry Franksman can vouch for that. And the 400 and the stipend. I don't want that either. I'm here to do a job. I'm here to work with the citizen. I know what it feels like to be on that side of the podium. And I want to work with the residents here in Fort Walton Beach, and I want them to know that I'm working for them and not for compensation.
Thank you. Travis?
Yeah, I don't necessarily know this is anything about our personal beliefs. This is absolutely about the process was followed, a referendum was triggered, and they were denied based off of a ballot summary language that was deemed ineligible, not the amendments themselves. We have the ability to fix that now. I say we fix it, we get it on a ballot. It's not going to take any more time or effort to get this on a ballot because we got two other ones that are going to go on it as well. And so let's get it on there and put it on there, and then everybody's got the ability to go out and sell what they believe is the best way for this to move forward, whether the people want it or whether they don't. So this is all about giving the general public the ability to choose how they want their government to work. And obviously I was supportive of that then, and I'm supportive of it now.
All right, thank you, sir. Other comments from council on this particular issue? Mr.
Happy
Meade?
to, since I think that's why we're here. On a personal level, I'm going to vote against it. I think that some sort of compensation encourages small business owners in different segments of the population to run for city council. They're taking time away from their jobs and et cetera. But as in my capacity here, as I've been elected and appointed, I believe I have a duty to vote in favor of putting this on the ballot. Since there was the appropriate number of petitions signed, I think we need to let the voters and the residents of the city of Fort Walton Beach decide. So I will, voice my opinion on an individual capacity, but it's for those reasons that I will be supporting moving this forward.
All right, thank you. Mr. Allegretto, you're the last one to voice something.
You know, I'm never at too much of a loss for words here, but I would say that Councilman Meade really kind of summed up exactly where I would stand on this issue as well. I would personally vote against this if it were to appear on a ballot, and I would probably campaign pretty hard for it as well. I share the same thoughts that not everybody comes from the same background. If we eliminate all compensation for anyone that wants to do this job, we're looking for wealthy people or retired people, and that really is a very small segment of the entire city population here. So I don't think it's a good idea. Obviously, we can all do what we can after it gets on a ballot to make sure it doesn't pass, but that's kind of where I'm at. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this issue? Come forward, please.
I'm Bob Lee, I'm here this evening to represent the Watch Group and the 1,400 plus people who signed petitions trying to get these three measures on the ballot. First, I'd like to just point out, and I don't want to dwell overly on this, but anybody that reads your city charter that can understand the English language prohibits you already from getting any emolument or compensation whatsoever. It's that plain. Somewhere, I was told back in history, your HR director said that you were employees. Well, I'm here to tell you, you aren't city employees. Your city charter creates three categories of people: officers, council members, and employees. So, with or without this, you're not entitled, pursuant to your city charter, to receive any emolument whatsoever. But notwithstanding, I've got a handout I would like to give to each of you. I don't know how many times we have to kick the same horse. What I just handed you is an extract from your minutes on August 22nd, when the council, a motion made by Mr. Walker, I forget if it says who seconded, you all agreed unanimously, you were on the council at the time, Mr. Meade was not there, Mr. Patrick was in. You agreed to place these three items on the ballot just as soon as the attorney could draft and prepare them for your consideration. That didn't happen promptly, so in October, you got an extract of those minutes. Mr. Walker made a more precise motion that said exactly the same thing. At that time, Mr. Meade was on the council the day you took office. You voted unanimously again and directed that the city attorney draft for your action the amendments in a legal form carrying forward, and this is very important, this was emphasized. I was here, I made a presentation of it. Carrying forward the intent of the petitions. Okay. That's what you voted on in October, and it passed unanimously. Many of the same comments were made. There was certainly, I think, Bryce made the same statement he made, Dick made the same statement, he was going to politics against it. I don't think Payne said what he said. But notwithstanding. So then, nothing happened. Each of you got an email from me in November where I asked for access to the city attorney since nothing was being drafted, so that the watch group could offer their input to the drafting of that amendment. Each of you got it. I talked to some of you about it after you received it. Mr. Peters responded. Mr. Peters said it was going to be difficult to do it in December with all the holidays and activities. We do it in January. So here we are, folks, in February. Almost March. You voted on putting these three things on the ballot. You didn't specify a time. Voted to do it and directed this young lady, the newly hired city attorney, to draft these amendments consistent with the intent of the petitions for your approval. That's where we stand. And that's applicable to all three. I won't repeat this when the others come up. The watch group has no problem whatsoever with the wording that staff has proposed. I hope you will, at some point, at your regular meeting, somebody will make a motion and you'll get that thing out there so that people can vote on it one way or the other. That's all I have to say unless I have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Anyone else wish to speak this evening on this subject?
Good evening, Mayor Ron Anderson, Councilman, Councilwoman Debbie Riley, Brown Lines, 207 Cummins Manor Court for Wanton Beach. I'd like to comment on Attorney Bob Lee's responses to the amendments, the three amendments. One, my question to you would be, how are you going to ask someone to vote on three charter amendments that almost everybody that sits on this council is a part of the watch group, and you want this diocese to make a decision on three charter amendments that put almost every last one of you sitting before the city of Fort Walton Beach and the guests that are present here. So I'd just like to answer, is there sometimes you call conflict of interest, sometimes you have to recuse yourself from voting. So my question is, how are you going to vote on something that you put before this diocese? All of you are watch group members, former watch group members. That's how you're sitting on the diocese. That would be my question.
I have no problem responding to that. This is how the world works. You want change? You got to get involved and do it yourself. I went out there, I walked around, I got these people to sign these documents. They knew what they were signing when they were signing. And, you know, they want their voice heard. There's multiple ways to legislate. There's ways to legislate from up here. There's 7 of us. We can make decisions. There's also ways for the general public to legislate, and that's through referendum. The last group up here basically said, stop, no, we don't care what you guys say. You don't have the ability to legislate. You got to go through us 7. So what do you have to do? You have to go run. You have to win a seat. You have to get up here so we can make the decision at that point in time. The great thing about this is we're not making the ultimate final decision. This decision is still in the people's hands, which I hear you come in and talk about the people constantly, and I appreciate that. There is no better process than what we're about to go through, hopefully, in our government system, in my opinion, is the people actually get to vote on what they want. If they want it, they get to vote yes. If they don't want it, they get to vote no. I'm not saying I know the answer to that. I'm saying we put it out to the people, they get to vote, they tell us the answer, and we move forward no matter what the decision is, whether they want it or whether they don't want it. So that is kind of how this whole thing works, is when you want change, you got to go fight for it and take it. If you come in here and your elected representatives ignore you, then what do? You go run for one of their seats. And then when you get up here, you have the ability to vote for something. That's how it works.
You're absolutely right, Councilman Smith, because, you know, my undergrad is political science, so I'm very knowledgeable on the process. Again, my question would be, I understand government is of the people, for the people, by the people. I have a complete understanding of that. And I believe in a democracy. My question again will be this. The diocese is a part of the watch group. It was your issue that you all brought before the city of Fort Washington Beach. And yes, you all did a nice block vote in 2023 to get your 4 people in office. Again, my question would be, there is such a thing called moral values. There is such a thing called recusing yourself if you're 100% involved in this process that came about with the signatures. So of course it's gonna get to the people because half of the council that's getting ready to vote is a part of the watch group. Why would you not? Attorney Bob Lee made it very clear, you will vote the way the watch group will vote because he put money behind it to be able to do it. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Riley. Anyone else wish to address the council on this? Mr. Minnick.
My name is Mike Minnick. I live at 106 Winnell Circle here in Fort Walton Beach. I have a question real quick for you, Mr. Mayor. Are we going to talk about the whole thing? We're going to talk about one at a time because we started out one at a time and now we're kind of morphing into the whole thing. Are we going to go one at a time and then speak as a whole? Or do you want us to speak as a whole and then talk individually?
Well, we're doing it one at a time. We started one at a time.
And then we're going to get the opportunity to speak as all of them together.
Yes, absolutely. At the end, you can summarize, yes.
Okay. I oppose the number one, compensation of elected officials. Nobody up here ran to be compensated. It is my opinion that other than you are officers, you're also employees. And every city around here except Destin compensates their city council. And every county compensates their county administrators. So I believe that the compensation of $432 a month is not really very much. And as an employee, I think as an employee and an officer, same thing. You should get what everybody else gets, and that's why I think you should be offered the insurance. When I was a city councilman, I didn't take it because I had TRICARE. So I didn't take it, others did. Nobody runs for insurance. They run to serve, but they should get what they deserve. I am gonna reiterate this at the end, but if you don't believe this ought to go forward, if you don't believe that this is what you should do, then don't send it forward. So what are you going to do? You're going to send it forward and then you're going to vote, you're going to campaign against it? That's not the right way to go about it. You guys are here elected officials, just like Mr. Smith said, councilman's last night. So I'll save the rest for the end. But as far as number one goes, I don't think it's the right way.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else on this particular issue? All right, if not, let's go on to Charter Amendment number 2, special assessments. Anyone on the council wish to speak on that item?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Ms. Cobb, once we think we have the summary ballot language compliant and legal, do we have to do anything different with the supervisor elections office to get it to a referendum?
No, I have the same answer. We'll prepare an ordinance, we'll have public hearings, and then we'll go from there, follow the process.
And I'll
But
probably
no
have-
additional petitions.
And I'll probably have the same question for the third one too. So,
Sounds good?
all right.
All right, thank you, sir. Other comments from council?
So you dropped this off for us, Kim. This is, I'm assuming this is going to be number 3, the ballot language for
Yeah.
is that correct?
Yes, I was going to discuss that when we get to number 3.
So as I was looking through the package, you know, I was looking for something similar for the other 2 based on the prior motions and direction. And then looking at the background, I guess I would say it looks like, in what you brought today, we've only got one ballot language summary prepared at this time. We don't have one for the other 2. I did read your note, or I say staff's notes. I do have some questions about that, but why don't we have one of these in our hands for the other two?
So the first two proposed charter amendments, there were not significant changes discussed to this point. So we do have drafts of all three. I actually have 3 ordinances already prepared based on the prior direction of the council. And Jeff and Nicole and I have met on all 3 and discussed them at length. So there aren't many changes to the first 2 unless we get, that kind of discussion tonight or at the regular council meeting tonight. With regard to number 3, we're not on that one yet, but there are reasons that I passed that out and that I was going to talk to next if we can just wait till we get to number 3. Are you okay with that?
Sure, you're just, or you, I understand, this one has more significant changes.
Correct.
The other 2s are minor, and you're going to be able to.
Correct.
Are those available to us now, or will they be coming out of the?
They're substantially similar to what's in the agenda packet.
Okay.
So I would go with those, and those are the prior charter amendments that you all had looked at, and that's how we basically
Got it.
intend to present them to you.
Perfect.
With regard to number 3, there are significant changes being discussed, and again, what I passed out today was not prepared by staff. But we'll talk about it when we get to that one. And it is the only one where I would say there's significant discussion and change at our level of staff and legal.
Thank you, Ms. Cobb. Other questions or comments from council? Anyone from the public wish to address us on this? Oh, I'm sorry.
I just have a question for Ms. Kopp on this one. I think I'm looking at the right thing here, but let me make certain before I make a fool of myself. The special assessments, where it reads here through the Niceville City Charter,
Yeah.
where you've included that as well. Can you kind of discuss that a little bit and explain that to everyone and why that's applicable?
You want to know why the Niceville Charter is applicable?
Correct.
So just for the benefit of everyone, what the staff report says is that the concerning language is, or if existing, be reimposed, which could run afoul of any existing bonds that have been issued by the city and which are tied to revenues from special assessments, or 2, dissuade future bond underwriters from working with the city if there is uncertainty. Pledged assessments might face the potential of not being reimposed to pay off the bonds. A better approach would be to follow the city of Niceville's approach and to remove the or if existing be reimposed language. So then we included that language so that you could decide whether you wanted to include that or if existing be reimposed language for those reasons.
And so that is direction that you are looking for from the council?
Correct. As stated in the staff report, it says it's a policy decision for the city council as to whether it wants to make those changes. Those changes would be different from the initial assessment.
And then I know that Mr. Lee has brought it up and others in the community have brought it up to me as well. And I know that we have this piece of paper here that kind of captures the motion that Mr. Walker made, especially the second one, as Mr. Lee pointed out. But when we are changing the wording of these things and people did sign these petitions that said, here's what you're signing and you want this to go on a ballot, we are still legal to do that. And we have the discretion to say, hey, you signed a piece of paper that said none of this, but then we're like, well, none of this, but we're taking these words out and kind of changing. I mean, I understand that the intent is still there.
Yeah. No, I mean,
But
you're
is that
legal, as elected officials of the city, it is legal for you to propose charter amendments besides what was petitioned for in the past. So that's city councils all the time establish charter review commissions, for example, where council members appoint people to review their charters and make recommendations to the council, but those aren't petition-based, and the council will, make its decision based on the recommendations of the charter review committee.
Okay.
The petitions are one way for the public to request charter amendments, but as elected officials, you can change those
Or we could make our own, or any ones that we wanted to have appear on a ballot.
Correct. And again, the council will make that initial determination, but ultimately, it's going to go to referendum and the people are going to decide. So council will vote to put something on a ballot, but the council doesn't decide on the charter amendments alone. That will go to the public.
Sure. But we can decide on what charter amendments go to the public.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Bryce, go ahead.
Good question, good point. You said something that makes a lot of sense too. To review the whole charter, would it not be if we've got 3 things on here now, and I see what Nick's saying, everybody signed a piece of paper saying we want to put this on there, now we're changing that. So we're changing the charter, we're technically changing the amendments. I mean, things change. 4 or 5 years ago, we were in Basque, and that's changed. So can we look at this from I wish Chief Page was here, from a holistic approach, like he likes to use, but let's look at the whole charter. I mean, I read it, and there's things in there that says that we can buy land on Santa Rosa Island, but now it's Okaloosa Island.
Yeah, and it's probably advisable for the council on a periodic basis to appoint a charter review commission to make suggestions and recommendations to you. So, but as of now, your options are, I mean, you can pass no charter amendments. You
Yeah.
can proceed with these in their current form or modified. You can establish a charter review commission to look at the whole charter or not. It's in the discretion of the council how you want to proceed on the charter.
I think that would be interesting to do, to look at the whole thing, whether we put a committee together or not, because Councilman Schmidt said something earlier too. What does it cost to put one of these on there?
$15,000 for
Per-
a special election.
If you have a special.
That's if there's a special election.
So
If you do it with an election that's already going, it is not $15,000, but I believe Mr. Lux is here and can answer specific questions possibly. Maybe.
Well, I mean,
You don't want to speak for him.
if there is a cost involved, but it's a one-time cost, I would be maybe a fan of putting more than 3 on there, like Schmidt was saying earlier. Let's put 10 on there if it's, you know what I mean? Everybody wants to get 10 for the price of 3, so I don't know what all that cost is, but it'd be cool to have all that baked in while we're in here this workshop. Let's talk about all of it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think we need to take that advice that our city attorney gave us and either resurrect or reestablish that charter review commission, you know, so that I'll never forget the night that you dollied in a whole bunch of boxes of petitions. We can have charter review commissions that are reviewing the charter without having to go through the effort of getting the petitions to trigger Paul Lux's office to have a referendum. But in this workshop environment, I don't know what y'all's appetite is for something like a charter review, and not to get too much in the scope of that right now while we're here discussing, you know, Charter Amendment 2, but in a future agenda, I would like to see us further discuss the appropriate time to put together that charter review commission, whether they meet every 4 years, 10 years, 5 years, that's up for discussion, but so that we won't have to go through this process of getting a whole bunch of petitions to amend the charter. Obviously, there's already the process where the elected officials can do that as well, but if we have a charter review commission that different elected officials appoint to get on that commission, I think that'd be very beneficial. Just want to make that comment, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walker.
So, hearing those things, yeah, I'm interested in flushing out other things maybe in the charter that could be updating, so maybe those commissions or committees do come together, but, you know, I'm just leery now at the time, as Mr. Lee pointed out, from August to now, and then we get a November election timeline. I mean, it makes sense to me that we can pursue both, which is have, you know, maybe start the discussion on having that committee, but with the budget process beginning and thinking about what staff does when there is an amendment, a charter amendment going before the people to vote on, is it true, Jeff, you'll have to kind of, Nicole, we have 2 sets of numbers you're looking at, one that if implemented and adopted, and if not implemented and adopted, is that correct? I mean, it affects the budget, so I have to imagine you've kind of run in 2 sets of calculations or figures there, is that right?
I mean, the timeline definitely comes into play for sure.
And just to reiterate, the timeline that we're talking about, what David's asking about, getting these on there for the public to vote to push them forward or not to, is totally different than if the budget one would actually get approved and we'd have to go out for a special election to get the budget actually approved. So that's another one we'll talk about in the third one. That timeline that I passed out doesn't have anything to do with this, just getting on there out to the public. It has to do if it gets approved and going forward.
So I don't want to mire these down any further than they've already been. If we can combine them all and get them before the public, it looks like November will be our next regular scheduled election, right?
Right.
I believe for November, the deadline to the supervisor of elections is about August 15th. Not that you would want to wait for that last minute.
No, but August
Let's
15th.
let Mr. Lux speak to that, please.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, yeah, the next regularly scheduled election after March is the August primary. Now, there are certain things, taxation things specifically, that must appear on a general election ballot, but anything else can be placed pretty much on any ballot that's available. So after the November election, and think forward to what normally happens on a November election. Number one, we have a large race for president that takes up a lot of the first column. We have United States Senate, we have Congress, we have all these local races, fire districts, and then we get constitutional amendments on the back. And so the ballot real estate we have in November can be pricey, if you will. So right now, tagging on to the November election would not generate cost typically, but if you put 15 charter amendments on there, and it forces my system to create a second ballot card for the city of Fort Walton Beach voters for each ballot, where one ballot equals 2 cards, then you're going to have to absorb the cost of that whole second card for all of your voters, because I can't pass that back to the county taxpayers because they're not the ones who put it there, if you will. So while typically speaking, tagging on to an election used to be the cost of legal advertising, now that my legal ads are now allowed to be published on my website instead of a newspaper, that has kind of gone away. Like I said, if your referenda force a second ballot card for each voter, that cost comes back directly to you. So I couldn't even guess what that might run. I mean, other than how much a ballot cost me. But
Go ahead.
It'd be cheaper than a special election, though.
oh, most certainly would be
Okay.
cheaper than a special.
So we've kind of got, you've got that option, which is, well, we had to add a ballot. It's
Well, and bearing in mind too, that the cost of a special election is essentially the same as the cost of your regularly scheduled municipal election in March of odd numbered years. So do it in November, do it in March, you end up in the same place, price-wise anyway. Or I'm sorry, not November, March, do a special election somewhere, or do it in March, you end up in essentially the same place. I can tell you that the appetite in my office for a special election sometime between March and August is 0, because we have so many other election deadlines that are crisscrossing each other that I would say thank you, but no thank you to a special election packed in there somewhere. So you really are talking about either tagging on to the August primary, tagging on to the November general, or waiting until your regularly scheduled March election.
okay.
If that makes sense.
It does, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It does, and it'll,
And I'll stick around until all your questions are answered, and I'll be here certainly for the vote.
Thank you, sir.
continuing my time there, that's, what I'm concerned about. Obviously, August is really right around the corner, and November seems doable. Not to say that August couldn't come together. You three, if y'all been working, you've got them ready. We get them, we approve them, they can tag on in primary in August. That's right around the corner. That will set you guys up for, your budget planning April of 25 period. We'll be taking that into account if it has passed or not. You won't be able to get it in.
For fiscal year 25, we would, yeah, but for 26, we could,
Correct.
if it passed.
Mr. Smith?
I believe, I'd have to go back and look at the minutes. I don't know if it was Hayward's second to last meeting or last meeting. I recommended us standing up a charter amendment committee. I think it's a great idea. However, as it applies to these, I don't think that we need to hold these off until that process gets underway. These have been sitting here waiting for 4 years to get in front of the people, and I view this as a standalone from reviewing the full charter. So absolutely, we get out of here, we discuss in a regular meeting about setting up a charter review committee, 100% for that, reviewing the whole charter, but I think these three stand alone, and you know, they require our attention now to get on a ballot, you know, as soon as possible, like I said, because these have been waiting 4 years to get on the ballot, so.
Thank you, sir. Other comments from council on Amendment 2? Anyone from the public wishes to speak on Amendment 2?
On behalf of the Watch Group again, we have no problem with the proposed revision to be compatible with the NYSERDA language, the language that is being deleted. If you do that, we've had applicability to the circumstance in which the fire fee was existing. Now that the fire fee assessment has been repealed, that language is no longer particularly meaningful to us. So the language that seems to be represented in the packet and being referred by your city attorney and staff is certainly amenable to us. And the steering committee depends upon Mr. Smith and I to offer that kind of advice. And we're very comfortable in saying that that's acceptable to the Watch Group.
Thank you, sir.
Mike Nick, once again. As far as this special assessment, I believe this is a job of city council. Certainly it's been brought up because the city council didn't listen to the public in the past with the fire assessment, or the fire assessment fee. That assessment fee is gone because of the city council. And I still believe that it should be the city council's job to do the assessments, but not without any kind of input. Certainly, you go out and talk to the folks that you know, that your constituents, that you believe in, and they can tell you what they believe. That's how you get this. I oppose this one as well. Since we're rambling around a little bit about where to put this, certainly the August primary would not be the place. I'm not either a Republican or a Democrat, so I mean, I get to vote. The November election, I'm coming in here and I'm voting for Biden or Trump. And what's this stuff on the second page? What, oh yeah, no. I think this would be better brought up if you bring it up. I don't think you should. But if you do bring it up in the municipal election. I mean, that's the proper time. November, man, they're eat up with everybody. So many things going on, so many campaigns, and that's what they're thinking about, the big stuff. And then when they get to the back, it's just pushed to the side. That's my opinion.
Thank you, sir.
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Paul, can you elaborate on, I don't know what the terminology is that they call, but you know, the percentage of people that start a ballot versus the percentage of people that actually complete 100% of the ballot in a general election? What, I know that it's not, everybody's not filling the whole thing out.
So you're talking about ballot drop-off.
So there you go.
Which is a real thing. So yes, there are plenty of people who vote top of ticket races and maybe some of the stuff in the second column, and they get to the third column and they turn it over and they see all those words on the back and they say, I'm done, and they walk away. I can't give you hard and fast numbers because of course it can vary widely depending on what's going on, but certainly there are fewer votes cast in bottom of the last column races on the backside of the ballot than there are in the top of the ticket races, governor, president, U.S. Senate, stuff like that. So it is an actual factor that indeed, some voters just simply do not finish ballots. There are plenty of voters who finish everything, and we love them too. But at the end of the day, voters are going to vote for what they're going to vote for. To give you a measure of how unpredictable voters can be, you all remember the bullet train initiative, right? That was on a presidential ballot. We had a voter who submitted a ballot with just the vote for the bullet train on it, and they voted literally for nothing else on the ballot, mailed their ballot in. So didn't even want to vote for president that year. So I mean, it really can vary widely, but it is an actual factor that a lot of people consider when they're looking at where things are going to get put on the ballot. On your municipal election ballot in March, as Mr. Minnick suggested, it would be your mayoral and council races, and then right there on the front page with everything else is where your charter amendments would start, because the only thing on the ballot in that election, of course, is gonna be your stuff.
Is there a industry general number? Is it 60%? Is it 70%? Do you have an idea from the county what we historically see? And I'm not holding you exactly to this number, but, you know, I'm assuming you have those, you run those statistics, so you guys have them somewhere, or what you can think the last one was,
We
or?
certainly have the statistics. I don't know that I look at them from that perspective very often, just because most people are more concerned about what was our total turnout and moving on. We will be looking at it more closely as it relates to the cities who have voted to move their elections to coincide with the general elections in November, i.e. Destin and Crestview, because, you know, again, voter drop-off is an actual thing, and if your municipal races end up at the bottom of the third column on the front of the ballot, sometimes people just don't get there, and essentially, you certainly have a higher turnout, of course, because more voters are presented the opportunity to vote in that race because they're there to vote for something else. But inevitably, you probably don't end up with, after the initial couple of spikes, after the first few elections, and you've got to run a couple of them to see before it levels off exactly where that drop-off occurs. I would say, when you're talking about the bottom of the second card, and again, it can be 100% issue-based too, right? I mean, there are people who are adamantly opposed to, and we're going to have, I think, we're up to 4 constitutional amendments on the ballot this year for November. There are plenty of people who are adamantly opposed or in favor of, you know, some or all of those 4 constitutional amendments. So they'll be looking at the back of the ballot. There will be people in your watch groups in Fort Walton that will be coming out specifically looking for these when they're on the ballot. So again, you know, it's very hard to put a number to it. But I mean, most studies put that drop off certainly in the near 50% range a lot of times.
Could I ask you a question as well?
Certainly.
I've observed that individuals, generalizing, who vote for municipal elections have done their research, interacted with prospective candidates, and done some of those things. And I know that's far off, and we're 4 years into this process. Would you suggest a special election to narrow the focus on these so that they can be addressed, or do you have any recommendation given the?
Well, I mean, it really, and what I can't answer, and of course that's why Nicole is here, and your clerk and your city manager, is how that fits, like particularly with number 3, with the timeline for your budgetary constraints. Right? I mean, you guys have to, by law, pass a budget by a date certain. If this is going to impact your budget, how do we structure this so that happens? And I have no earthly idea how your budget works. I have enough fun with my own.
But ignoring which side of it you're on, I guess what I'm asking is, do you have any suggestions to get the best substantive response from the voters?
If you're looking for the best response from your voters, I would say your 2 best choices would be either in conjunction with the November general, when more people would at least be given the opportunity to vote in the race, and your regularly scheduled municipal elections when your voters expect your municipal elections to occur.
So you would not recommend a special election then?
I just don't always, you very seldom see a large turnout in special elections. I mean, I've done them. God bless Destin when they have a vacancy. Mary Esther, when they have more than one vacancy, we have to do special elections for them. And you know, those percentages are usually in the single digits.
Thank you, sir. All right, anyone else wish to speak on Charter Amendment number 2? All right, let's talk about number 3. Ms. Kopp, I'll let you start.
Okay, so on number 3, in the packet, you'll see, and we talked about it before, so I know I haven't given much of an introduction, but on this one, it probably deserves a little more because I've handed out something with the information that's not in the agenda. So in the agenda, you have the language of the original proposed charter amendment as proposed a couple of years ago. And then you have an example from Marco Island, And then you also have what I passed out via email yesterday, and then I handed out a printed copy from the city clerk today. And I just want to go over that one. This handout, and if you want, I could just read the beginning portion of it without all the exceptions for the public, but it's a bit of a modification to the original charter amendment based on conversations with some of the council members that I've had. Staff has opinions on this draft that they will express to you tonight. It is not something that they prepared or necessarily support, but it is a bit of a modification. So just to read it for the public so that they understand what we're talking about, and if this does proceed forward in any form, just for the public to understand, it would be a part of an ordinance with public reading, so they'd have multiple opportunities to weigh in on it. But the beginning portion of this says, without prior referendum and approval, all budgeted expenditures, including capital expenditures and repayment of municipal debt, shall be limited to an increase from the prior year's expenditures in an amount which is the lesser of 3% for the then current Department of Labor Bureau of Statistics Consumer Price Index, which is the CPI, herein referred to as the spending cap, except that the following shall be excluded from the budget for purposes of calculating the spending cap. And then there's a list of exceptions. We've also discussed taking out the reference in that paragraph to include capital expenditures and repayment of municipal debt. There are probably, if we went this route, additional exceptions that we would add. So this is a draft form of something that was provided to me by a council member that we need to discuss in public as another option and could be further modified. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Ms. Cobb. Mr. Allegretto.
So, this is a question for Ms. Neighbors. What's left? Like, there's so many exclusions here that are excluded from the budget for the purposes of calculating the spending cap.
So
like, what is left?
The Marco Island one covers a lot of good things with the emergencies, capital expenditures, the debt, the enterprise funds. This one that staff did not prepare that we were given includes the entire budget and a cap. There's a lot of other things that we can't control when we're budgeting. There's things, debt service, there's asset sales tax that wasn't included in here.
Okay.
We can't put a cap on asset sales tax. Surplus property, that's one. Our cost allocation plan, we can't do it on that. Legal services, we all know how much you like to use Ms. Cobb. We can't do that. We have capital outlay, CIP, asset replacements, leases, fuel and oil, software upgrades, contract pricing, design agreements. And I have a whole list of it I can add in there. But there's a lot.
So I guess there is a lot.
Yes.
All right. I'll save more questions for later. Thank you.
All right.
Just kind of wanted to have a rundown of that.
So just to point out, I guess I'm going to specify further what kind of the point of this one is. When you look at the Marco Island charter amendment, that I think, and I don't want to speak for Unical, but based on our conversations, I would say you probably would support Marco Islands more than the original. But what Marco Island did was they have operating expenditures shall be limited to an increase from the prior year's expenditures of 3% plus the then current federal COLA per year. And then they have their exceptions. This, what we handed out and what we're discussing, talks about those expenditures would be capped at an amount that is the lesser of 3% for the CPI. So Marco Island has an and, here we have an or. This is going to be, the proposal I passed out is therefore more restrictive. So that's one of the differences. The exceptions we could work on, but that's kind of a key.
The sticking point is the end. I provided in the backup the COLA for the last, I don't know, 25, 30 years. And I think it was 24 instances, the COLA was less than the 3%, where I think 4 were 0%, so we wouldn't be able to increase at all. So I have something from the, just so you guys know, I've been speaking with the finance director of Marco Island. I asked him, I said, what would that do? And I just want to read this. He said, if that was a case and he had the or and not the end, he said, what has helped him with the plus? He said, I would say in the years in which we had record inflation rates, the 3% COLA covered the increase in operating costs. It was nice. It also helps in the years when you're addressing recruiting and retention issues and are adjusting your pay scales to stay competitive, as well as increase wages or bargaining agreements. Property insurance rates have also been going up quite a bit due to the hurricanes the state has faced in the last few years. If you do the lesser of the 3% COLA, you may be at zero in some years per your COLA table below, which is surely going to put you in a bind. I really hope this helps you.
Mayor, because I made this mistake recently, that I did not ask. Who did prepare this document?
I received it from a council member.
Can I mean,
I got a copy of it from the watch group. I asked for.
okay, so this was prepared.
If I could go out of order, I think I could give a lot of insight.
I just, you know, again, when I'm looking at something, I want to know, did the staff prepare this? Okay.
No, as we stated multiple times, staff did not prepare.
Okay. Well, I heard it was handed to you. I didn't know
Understood.
who handed it to you.
Right.
So that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, and my email.
From you, but you did not prepare.
If I can give you a little background, I'm not opposed to the watch group, but I've never been to one of their meetings. I don't recall ever signing a petition, but the people spoke when they signed those petitions. As with the first one, there's a good chance that I'll vote against this one, but I want to know what the people signed the petition for. And so that's exactly why I requested a copy of it from them, to find out what they signed the petition for.
Well, okay.
And so,
and I totally understand that. What I'm asking is when we're looking at something and we're trying to move forward with the wording and all of that, I mean, we've been doing this on various other issues. We want to know where that wording came from, whether it was a suggestion from a political action committee or from our own staff.
yes, no, and because we're getting two different directions, and I wanted to hear it from the people that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is a little bit of a modification though from the original charter amendment, because when you go back to the original, that referred to the base budget and had a specific number. So that one would have been even more restrictive to this, so.
And
from
did
that
not include
perspective-
these exclusions either.
Correct.
And I understand that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Other comments from council? Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I think through the process from the beginning to now, there's been a lot more knowledge about how the city budget works. And so the intent and the watch group is not to put the city in a bad position. So that's why you see so many changes from the original petition, is because obviously we don't want to not be able to collect TDC tax. We don't want to not be able to take federal grant money and state grant money and whatever else. And you know, some of these enterprise funds, the way that they run, they're self-supportive. So as you learn more, you know, you go and change. It's not this hard line of this is what it's going to be, or you got to put it on there and stuff like that. It's trying to put some guardrails in place to move forward, because Mr. Minnick said, while it's his belief that it's us seven that make the decisions up here, there is also a way for the public to legislate, and that's through charter amendments. To go into this process and not put some guardrails on, because fool me once, the first go around on all this stuff, shame on me, you're not gonna get me again. You know, we're gonna put some guardrails on how we want our city to run. And this is kind of what has been come up with. I'm willing to listen to exactly what staff says, is that this will be catastrophic and detriment to the city. A lot of this stuff that's in here, you know, I think is doable. The COLA thing, I need someone to explain this to me. Cost of living adjustment. We give that to people to make up the difference between the cost of living from one year to the next year. So you're saying you want well, when the cost of living increases 0%, you still want to give them 3 or 5%? That's not a cost of living adjustment.
Well, the 0% would not only be with personnel, it'll be all the other general fund stuff in there, like utilities and insurance and all that, so you wouldn't be able to increase.
Correct, but I guess maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I think the biggest thing that I've been hearing is we believe that we're gonna lose employees. I kind of look at this from a different perspective. I don't know, what was it, 8 years that we had COLA freezes on employees? I don't know, Terry might be able to tell us that.
It was probably 6.
6 years. So the way that I read this is you put something like this in place, it guarantees that if there is inflation and there is a difference from 1 year to the next, that there never has to be a freeze ever again. The only time that there's going to be a freeze is when there's not any growth. You know, so I don't think, in my opinion, that this should cost the city employees. Especially after we've just done 2 or 3 pay studies that has brought everybody up to the market. Everybody should be very close to the market right now. I think our last one was 2 years ago, and I think, aren't we in the middle of another one right now?
Not right now, no, we're not.
I thought we just had a meeting.
finalized that last year.
Okay.
When you guys first came on. or
Right.
when you first came on.
Right. But I believe that y'all brought it back to us again to do another one. Am I correct in that?
No.
I'd have to
You
go
guys
back
just
and-
finalized one about a year ago.
Not even a year ago, it was a couple months ago.
Yeah, regardless, it was recent, but everybody should be at the market or above the market, I'm assuming at this point. Right?
Yeah, we just had you guys, I'd say probably 4 months ago.
Yeah, it
5
wasn't
months
very long ago.
Make the adjustments citywide. Problem is, it does change that quick though in this current market.
Correct. It's going to happen and it phased in over years because obviously we have a budget and this came out after the budget. We didn't know the number before this past year's budget. I get that, but what I'm saying is we're as a city as close to market as we probably have been in who knows how long, 20 years?
Based on 2022 numbers.
Correct. Well, you're always running in the rears because you get the data in the rears.
So it changes daily. You ask the chief, compares to Okaloosa County.
Yeah.
We go up a quarter, they go up 50 cents. We tie them, they go up. It's constant, and it's been like that for several years.
Right. But
As of the last study, that's where we are, and I don't have another one out there right now.
I guess, like I said, my understanding is the biggest hesitation to this one is the fear of losing employees. And, like I said, I don't see that. This guarantees them that if there is a inflation from 1 year to the next year, that they are going to get some sort of increase. If there's not, then they don't. I mean, that's a cost of living adjustment. We don't take the money away, but we just don't. If you could please stop talking.
No, I won't. You don't tell me, there, tell me.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Manning, let's hold your comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Robert Rules ordered me. I appreciate that.
Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Councilman Smith, I mean, that is, obviously a fear, but my fear as a finance director is it restricting us on doing things like utilities, fuel, insurance, and different items like that that are in the general fund, if we have to come in at 0%. And then the timeline that I did pass out to you guys has
Right.
nothing to do with this actually pushing forward. It's if it actually passes, I'm really worried about the actual budget timeline.
Yeah.
I have to pull that up just to kind of look at it so the public can see it.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is Nicole goes through, I mean, and Mr. Lux can say this too, but information would need to get to him by August 15th for the November election. Our budget, as you know, we have a workshop prepared in August and budget finalized in September and has to be done by September 30th because our fiscal year starts October 1st. So the timeline is something Nicole and I have been talking about the last couple of weeks, how that would operate. We close out the fiscal year October, November, December, audit purposes in January, prepare the budget, February, March, April, bring it to council for the initial millage rate in June, and finalize the budget in July, bring it to council in August for a workshop. So just the timeline of if a budget is over the X%, whatever it happens to be that year, getting it out for an election to be able to be approved in time for the budget.
I won't have a finalized balanced budget until August. So anything before that, I'm not able to determine based on this timeline.
All right, so in the one that was just provided to you, your concerns there are time frame
The
and
exceptions, you're talking about this one?
I guess that one that was just,
That's why I'm very good.
yeah, you got it marked up, okay. I would just like to hear.
This one has nothing to do with time frame. My biggest concern is that three-letter word, and I highly recommend Ed being in there with whatever exceptions we all work on. My other big concern is if it passes, I know that most of you guys are for this going in the public voting. We're not 100% against that. We want to do something that doesn't handcuff the city, but within the constraints that the original things were put forth. So we're trying to work with you guys, but that is a huge, huge sticking issue for me. And also that timeline, because I don't know how it would actually work.
And so the repercussions that you're talking about, you said, have to do with fuel and insurance and what else?
Fuel, I don't know if we do. There's a lot. Like software, like think about the software upgrades that we did last year. The police they had to get that new Tyler software. It was like $500,000. I have the budget software that's about to go live. I have the grant software. All that kind of stuff I worry about. If you have a 0%, we're not going to be able to do it. And sometimes it's necessary. It's just things like that that aren't included within these exceptions that worry me. If it's or, I would propose a ton more exceptions than I would with an and.
Okay.
Nicole, for my clarification, which ballot would you choose to put this on? March, November?
I mean, I would choose neither, obviously. But if you look at the November, scroll up right, highlighted. So these are all the different things, like our audit starts in January. Can you make it smaller a little bit? Sorry. I know that's really small, but I was trying not to be too nerdy on here. So our audit starts in January. So like tomorrow, I have a meeting with the auditors to finalize the audit. We have the final fiscal year 2023 numbers. So then in April, we can sit down, dig in, know the actuals, know kind of what we spent that last year, and I can start trend analysis on my revenues and my other expenses that I don't get from the directors. So that starts in April. We talk about it all. We don't even set our tentative millage till June. The property appraiser doesn't even certify the millage rate till July 1, and I don't even finish my revenues. I mean, this year, I don't know if you guys remember, I was supposed to get the final ones in June. I didn't get it until almost the end of July. You don't want to start a budget early and trending revenues because you really don't know what's going to happen. I can't use 3 months of data. I use other years of data, but you really want to find out what the current just scenario is for the year. By law, I have to have the budget approved by September 30th. If that budget happened to be above, and Jeff and I are not planning on trying to blow up the budget and do these things, but God forbid it had to be above whatever was set, the public can't vote until November. So logistically, it doesn't work. Like I have to have something approved and there by September 30th. So that's what worries me. The March one won't work at all because when I spoke to Mr. Luggs, if I did it on a March one, we would have to have everything submitted to him by December 15th. I haven't even started my audit yet. I don't even start my budget until April. So, and the public vote would be in March. The public vote would actually go before I even started my budget. So none of that makes sense. And as a CPA in my ethics, I cannot get behind that.
So Ms. Neighbors, then you're saying a special election of a date that you're choosing would be better?
Yeah, I mean, that would have to, it would be hard. We could have everything to him for a November election by August 15th, but the actual election doesn't work. I could be finalized my budget by then, but the special election would have to be in like the beginning of September. I don't know his timeline and how that, it takes him a while to get everything prepared, so, and he can speak on that, I'm not really sure.
Can I just ask a question? Again, I'm definitely not the expert on any of this stuff, but if it were to be placed on a ballot, which again, I don't necessarily want, if they were to vote on it, couldn't we say, hey, this takes effect, whatever time frame that would allow that? I mean, I know you're trying to prepare a budget, et cetera, we get it on, say that just for example, the November election. Couldn't we say, okay, this is effective going forward with the next city budget? I mean, is that what we're saying? Or are we trying to like plan a budget out to coincide with this that would, like, it's effective right away?
Well, let me ask.
Okay, I think there might be, if I'm hearing right, there might be confusion on which charter amendment we're talking about, because we're talking about passing or not the charter amendment, but then assuming it's passed,
Right.
then Nicole's talking about, okay, now we can't amend the budget above 3% for CPI with this amendment, so you would have to go out to referendum with another charter amendment. Or, I'm sorry, with another budget amendment to referendum. And so that's the one where the timing is difficult because the election for that subsequent election does not coincide with the budget planning.
Because I don't think you guys could approve a budget that would be over that without the public saying you're allowed to do that, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, because-
part of it too is, even like last year, we got direction from council, you wanted the budget lowered, and we got to work and the budget came back lower, it was minus 4% or something like that. It's the future budgets that are difficult to figure out because you don't, even when I'm not here, or any of you may not be here, you passing a budget for the September 30th deadline, if it happens to be 5%, and it can only be 2%, it would have to go to the public for a vote to pass that budget, but the election wouldn't be till November. So the timeline is what we're trying to wrap our heads around. That's very difficult to do. And it's not, again, it's not this year. You all can say, I don't want your budget to ever be over 3%. We're going to bring the budget back to you, not over 3%. But it's just the future. This puts something in for future when none of us are here anymore for the city to be back into a corner for something that they may not be able to fix.
I think the question is, if this council decides to send these to a referendum, can we stipulate on that same election an effective date so that it doesn't handcuff you and these
That's exactly what I was saying.
these
So you
new
can-
restrictions would take place on such and such a date? You would have time to plan for those, you could incorporate them in your
And
plan.
I'm not saying 10 years down the road, I'm
No,
saying
but
like
if
the
it's a
following
reasonable
fiscal
effective
year.
date following an
reasonable
election,
amount
if
of
this
time.
goes to a ballot. You know,
You could put an effective date on this charter amendment.
and would not that help you if there was an effective date that
But that's different, I think, than what the finance director is talking about. Because if this charter amendment, let's say you put an effective date of 2026 on this charter amendment, and it passes in November of 2024, but it's not effective until 2026. That's fine, but what this says is that without another referendum, you can't go above the 3% or CPI unless there's an exception. So if you wanted to go above 3% or CPI, whichever is less, you would have to go back to another election. And since the election is, right? Am I explaining?
Yeah, they're switching the two of when
Right.
the start date of it is versus when
That's-
it's actually implemented.
That's what I think the confusion is on. You can do the effective date change for a start date, but Nicole still has the budget issue because state law says September 30th, and we would have to have a referendum.
I don't have an issue of the effective date, it's what goes on after that.
That's her question.
Mr. Mayor? Oh,
go ahead.
So 2 recent events, I'm trying to put it in my head. I've always had an interest in the past budget and then amendments. So Terry's coming today, and the next meeting coming up, $299,000, I think. That was part of the budget process. We talked about it last time. We've had 9% increase and then an 11% increase, and then in the budget that was presented that you mentioned was reduced by 4%, undervalued the expectations of insurance by a considerable amount. I mean, if we'd have gone 10%, Terry might not be here today asking for $299,000, but the budget wouldn't have been decreased either. So how do these things affect, let's say it was in place today, the way you see Marco Island? It passes in favor of and aligns with that. A surprise insurance event occurs and Terry's back up here asking for $300,000. Where does that money come from?
Well, I recommend that to be in the exceptions. It's kind of like with the grants too, you wouldn't be able to. So think about it, even if you have, and there's an exception as a grant, but it's also a budget amendment. So those are the different things that you're not thinking about as well. The grants, you're not thinking about the match portion, you're not going to accept a grant. But all of these come back to a budget amendment. You're going to have budget amendments. It happens. Like I've told you and other council members before, this is a plan. We're planning to spend the money. It's never going to be correct. We're going to be under, usually it always ends up under our actual expenditures. But we're going to have to amend that budget to be able to spend that money. It's just the way it works. The landing is a perfect example as well. well.
Mr. Lux?
Yeah, carryovers, carryovers.
Carryovers and, if budget amendments weren't in that exception.
So as it relates to the actual election itself, and this is where I'm understanding Ms. Neighbor's concerns, right? So I can do special elections in odd numbered years. My staff will shoot me for saying this out loud pretty much any time, because we can pull off special elections pretty easily. Obviously, she's already stated the March election timeframe just because of, again, the budget deadlines, which I'm not aware of, and I don't have any idea of what your headaches are for when you get to start your budget. So, I mean, could I do a special election in July in a, odd numbered year? Absolutely. But every even numbered year, not going to have that flexibility, right? I mean, qualifying is the 71st to the 67th day prior to the primary election. Not to throw any shade on anybody, but the legislature's talking about trying to bring back a second primary, which is going to push our primary into July, which is going to push qualifying back into April, which is going to bang right up against the March elections, and that's just going to make a big giant mess out of an even numbered year period. But even without the second primary, my deadlines don't move around a lot for this stuff, right? Because for the August primary, which is on August 20th, ballots for overseas military are already in envelopes and moving before the 4th of July. And so when I say we're not doing a special election between March and August, I'm serious. We could put it on the August ballot, but you got to have it to me by like May, what did I say, May 15th or something like that. Because when ballot languages when candidate lists are solidified after qualifying is over, we have to get our ballot artwork to printers, and we are competing with the entire state of Florida in August. We were competing with the entire United States for space on ballot printers, ballot printing companies, printers for our ballots, so we can't just go, well, we'll just, kick that another month. We don't have that luxury. You literally got to, as soon as qualified, that's why I got to have it by August 15th for November, because as soon as that August 20th primary is over and it's certified, my ballot artwork is off to the printers already before the end of August in order to get our order in the queue to get them timely. And we all have those problems, but that's what makes it problematic for, like I said, I can do a special election all day long, anytime you want in a non-numbered year, but those even numbered years would be problematic for you based on the deadlines I have to deal with from the election stuff we're already doing.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, one more thing. I've said it since these came up, I often would scratch my head and think, it's good. The 1,400 people that signed, 1,400 plus signed, brought it up here. Their intent was to control the spending of government. That was it. And it was worded one particular way and lots of gnashing of words there, how it came together. But, it's almost a lazy way to do it. The hard work way to do it is by us. Now, I want them to go. I want these ballots to go. I want them to get on there. I have a belief that no matter what measures pass, that these guys that work here 8 hours a day as a team, trying to figure out how to make things work, they'll either work around what we put in place, those guardrails, they will find a way to do it, but it's incumbent upon us to spend our time at that budget. Now, I know this year in this budget, the one major win, and it was a significant win because the people spoke about it, was the fire assessment fee. It went away. I think it was $1.3 million. Now, since then, I've seen some things come in the form of the budget amendments, and I have to ask myself, was the budget really decreased? Or was it some form, nothing, it's just the way it happens, smoke and mirrors. Because at the end of the year, we have to go look at the amended budget and see what happened to it. If the amended budget has continued to grow exponentially, then what did we actually do there? So I look forward to us as a group working together as we see fit to increase spending if you so choose on any budget item you want, or to to exercise the will of the people who've said we want to control government spending. And at the end of the year, will I be able to raise my hand and say I worked hard to try to reduce spending of taxpayers' money? That's where I want to end up on it, regardless, despite what a charter amendment might say. That's one that I want to operate from as if it were in place today, even greater. Then I don't need a number of 3%, 1%, 5%. I just want to be studious and good managers of the people's money the best that we can. And that's, as we know, sometimes we disagree on what that might look like, but that's okay. That's what I think that our role is to be up here, is to execute the will of the people as they've expressed it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Schmidt.
Mr. Lopes, on those even years, and again, without knowing any of the logistical side that your office does, but on those even years, can you have it in a special election on those even years separate from the August state and national primary?
Well, like I say, it's, so in March, when we have your regular municipal elections, you coinciding with the other municipalities who are still on that ballot in odd numbered years. But an even numbered year, again, depending on the year, this is, I mean, I sound like a politician right now. So presidential years, we have a presidential preference primary, which is a countywide election. It is always a countywide election. That one is, it's more problematic once every 4 years in that even numbered year when it is a presidential year, because of the presidential preference primary. In an even numbered year that is a gubernatorial year, I have a lot more flexibility because we're only talking about the elections for Marietta, Valparaiso, and Cinco Bayou, which is a 3-precinct election. I can do a lot between those time periods in a gubernatorial year that I can't do in a presidential year because, as I've already said, right, we finished the March election, we're backed up into qualifying in June, and then ballots go out by 1 July, and we're right on the horse. August election is over. We're literally putting ballots out as soon as we can after we have them, from the August election to the overseas military, because certainly in a presidential year, more important to mail their ballots as early as I can. The law says I have to mail them not sooner than 45 days before the election, so back up from November 5th this year, 45 days. That puts us mailing things in September to the overseas military, and we always try to exceed those deadlines. So where I would fit another election to keep track of while we're doing all of these other things is an incredibly small window. Better in a gubernatorial year when I have a little bit of room to play between March and, say, June, but in a presidential year, I don't have that same flexibility because of the complexity. And I mean, it's always a bit of a crapshoot for whether you are in presidential year, whether it's an open primary for both Republican and Democrat parties brings out more voters, whether it's just a primary for one party over the other because there's an incumbent that's running, of course, changes that dynamic also.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm asking, I'm just trying to find that win-win to, like you mentioned, a lot of information need to be submitted to your office around that April-May timeframe. And like Nicole mentioned, a lot of times we're not getting actuals until that July timeframe. So the objective, what I'm trying to get to, without knowing the logistical and the information that you just provided, is finding that sweet spot to get the election done while still being able to get.
I can say categorically, in an even numbered year, fitting an election anywhere between July and November is not going to happen.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And like what Councilman Walker said, we really did analyze the budget this year and do a great job at it. I'm looking forward to doing it again next year. Even though we know, just like we had last meeting with insurance and other stuff, everything goes up. I'm glad TDC's on here. That revenue just went up from like 37 to 43 million, and we get a percentage of that. So we all know the budget's going to go up every year. You know, TDC's going up, so this is going to go up. I'm glad it's excluded on here, but I'm still kind of caught up on the time and the date thing. Not to go back and rehash that out, but you said that you guys are okay with the Marco Island version?
If it were to go, I'm okay with the Marco Island.
Well, that's still, if that one was the wording on here, is that still gonna be the same time issue perhaps, or does that give you more flexibility and more?
It gives more flexibility on what we can budget, so probably less probability it would have to go out. But the timing is still gonna be an issue if it does exceed that. So the timing will always be an issue if it has to go out.
And like Councilman Schmidt said, there's a win-win meet in the middle. Your all's version of win-win is the Marco Island wording version of it. And we would still, how many people actually have that wording? I know you reached out at one point in time. How many municipalities or governments in Florida are actually doing what we're doing now?
The only one I'm aware of at this point is Marco Island. I reached out to the attorney for the League of Cities. He wasn't aware of any, but he did say the league doesn't track that. So I reached out to some city attorneys I know across the state from South Florida, Central Florida, and here, and nobody was aware of one. I can't say 100% sure, but the one I know of is Marco Island.
And that's all we can do is learn from our neighbors, like we're trying to do with what our compensation should be. We learn from our neighbors, but Marco Island's the only try to learn from them. That's interesting, the things that they've said and told us, and we've been able to learn from them. I just hope, like Councilman Smith said too, I don't want to do anything that's going to handcuff us from completing some of these great projects that we have going, but at the same time, we do want to be smart with the money. But so is that what we're here, even the wording right now? Is this wording, because I've talked to the Marco Island to a lot of people since we brought up a few meetings ago. I haven't had a chance to talk to this with a lot of people in the community. So if we're here to voice our opinion on kind of the wording, whether it's and or Marco Island or this, it seems like we should maybe be favoring more towards the Marco Island version as a compromise meet in the middle. Is that what we're doing?
That is a policy decision for council. That is, I would say that is what staff supports.
Right.
Well, let me say this too. I mean, the Marco Island it uses the word and. So maybe the cost of living and 3%. That doesn't mean that we're going to bring the budget back to 3% plus whatever the COLA is. If it's not that, council would still have the ability to say your budget's too high, cut it. I mean, that's just, it prevents the constant going back to trying to figure out the timeline to bring it back for the public to vote on a budget, whatever the percentage is. I mean, the council could say, cut your budget 20%. It wouldn't matter what the cap would be. I mean, you guys still make the decision on that.
That's kind of my question for the city attorney is, I think that's what you're asking us to decide here today. One of the primary policy decisions, the OR represents, it's my understanding the OR represents the petitions. Am I correct?
The OR is, yeah. The OR is what was in the initial petitions. It's not the exact same wording beyond that, but that's the closer to the petition.
Mayor. And to follow up on that, the OR represents the petitions, and these are our city council charter amendments to the charter based on things received, petitions signed by the watch group. So if the sentiment of this council is that we do not want to handcuff the city, prevent the city's growth, things of that nature, we can change our city council charter amendments that we are trying to put on a ballot however we see fit, as you stated before.
That's the policy decision for council, correct.
Lex, go ahead.
And I know that OR is in there, but we're having to change it, right? That's why I didn't come on the first time. We have to change it. Change the wording, whether it's the amount of words that are on there or this and that.
Oh, there was a technicality where we did have to change the wording, but it can be changed to reflect an and or.
So we got to change that. We're also changing it because originally it didn't include some of these additional things.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
and I want to be clear, on this passed out document, this isn't intended to be final. This is for discussion. The main point here is the and or, and it's the whichever is lesser between the 3% and the CPI. But the exceptions, I think, as staff has pointed out, we would probably modify these if you went with this route.
We would bring back recommendations on what exceptions, look at those suggestions, obviously.
And merge them all together,
And merge them all together with what we also make.
Just to make sure nothing was left out.
So we're back to that change word. We're changing the charter notice, we're changing this, we're changing, it's time to change it all. I'd like to even change Amendment 1 to make us employees. I'm not going to do that.
Well, we're at a point where we need to come to a consensus on which way we're going to move forward.
Did you want to let the public speak on this one?
Yeah. Mr. Holmes?
And just a reminder, you all wouldn't make a motion at the workshop. You would do it at a regular council meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Michael Holmes, 114 Empress Avenue. Just a couple of things, maybe this is a wrap-up time. I'm not exactly sure where we are in the process of it. But a question for the city attorney. The amendments that the watch group had signed, have there been significant changes made to those amendments presented tonight that those people did not see?
I mean, the word significant is kind of subjective. They're in the agenda packet as they were originally presented, and then we're discussing the changes. So I would leave that to you all to decide if you think it's significant. But what I would say is whatever the council decides to do, if anything, it will go back to the public, so nothing's going to be hidden. We would have whatever they decide to do. If they decide to proceed with any charter amendment, it will have multiple public hearings where the public would have input, and then ultimately it would be for the public to vote on a ballot. So the council's not actually deciding to amend the charter. They're deciding to give the public the choice, or not.
Y'all look at that plaque behind you, it says 1941. It's when the city was established, and math is what, 75 years ago? Look at how the city is now, look where we are. Mr. Payne, Mr. Walker, I totally agree with what you said. You know, we pretty lot before, but exactly what you said is right. Y'all are sitting up here to make these decisions on this amendment 1. If you don't like the compensation the way it is, y'all 7 need to make that decision. You don't need to put it out to the public, because if you do, then it's going to get convoluted and we're going to be back where we are if it doesn't go the way that you want it.
Point of order, this is the third position we're supposed to be talking about.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. We're getting near summertime. Mr. Holmes has the floor.
I apologize. So, go back to that. Y'all 7 are sitting up here to make that decision, just like all the other amendments that you're discussing. It's your right to not go over 3%. The fire assessment fee is what brought all this up. That's where it all started originally. And not 1,400 people did not approve it. That came afterwards. The deal is, there was a lot that did approve it. And if we, at the council at that time that was sitting up there, had made an amendment like some of this here, it would have limited y'all from making decisions tonight. Just like if your protocol was the same as our protocol, there would have never been a motion and it passed without public discussion on getting rid of the fire assessment fee. So, you know, you can't limit yourselves. That's what y'all are there for. You need to make these tough decisions. You know, if they come with a budget and it's too high and you don't like it, then you have to get 3 other people to support your decision. If you don't, the best thing to do is support what the majority does and move forward. That's why the city's been here for 75 years. And that's what the public expects from the 7 that are sitting out there. As Mr. Walker said, make the tough decisions. That's y'all's decision. If the public does not like it, they'll contact each one of you individually. Or as they've always done, or you'll go out and reach out to them. So we don't need charter amendments or charter changes on something that's worked so good for 75 years. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lee.
I'm not going to repeat myself, but you already voted on this twice before. Let me add a little bit to what Travis had to say. When the charter amendments were first prepared, we did not, the steering committee of the Watch Group, did not have the full understanding of city finance that we've developed during the past 5 years. I think most of you who were on council know you didn't see my ugly face until the fire fee showed up. Okay? But from the time the fire fee showed up until today, I watched every meeting, either on video or been here in person. I think I know as much about city finance as any of you do. Okay? And I say that almost as a challenge. what we have put forth, we realized that the amendment that 1,400 people signed petitions for, 14 plus, to get on the ballot. They didn't get on a ballot because the judge didn't understand the difference between a petition and a ballot. Okay, it was that simple. Fortunately, we had an election quicker than we could have an appellate decision, but that would have been reversed. Okay. But what we had put on the ballot, which the people asked for you to give them a chance to vote on, would have been so harsh. Okay? It had a base budget. What I provided to you, and I provided this as early as November. Staff has been looking at this for months. This lady's had it in her hand since November the 11th. That man had it since November 11th. Travis had it before that. Okay? All that did was make it more workable for the city of Weehawken Beach. We eliminated the idea of a base budget. The base budget wouldn't work because we're 4 years removed from when we picked that number. Okay? All this talk about people and how people are only going to get X% of raise, not people going to leave. Folks, we're talking about a budget. We're not talking about a category. You can move, you create priorities. 2 years ago, your priority was your employees. Okay? Never quite understood it, that was the number one priority in the city of Weehawken Beach, but that's what you folks voted on to go on council this time. You can pay your people anything you want to pay them, but you're only going to have so much money to use. You're going to create priorities. If you want to continue giving people cost of living, CPI, plus 2% longevity for just hanging around for another year, which is what you currently do, you don't base it on merit. If they're here, they get another 2%. I ran a business down here as big as your city. Okay? You came to the dollars involved. If I'd done that, I would not have been successful. But read what is there. The budget cannot increase by more than, not a particular category. You can pay your people 10%, that's what you want to decide to do, but you're going to go out here and have to quit spending money somewhere else. I suggest maybe if you start looking at what you're paying your people and how you're paying your people, you can probably pay some of them more, but you may have less employees. You may have too many employees when it gets down to it. But the whole synopsis of what I've tried to do is take what would have been so harsh that it could have potentially created chaos. Look at everything that's happened in Marco Island, okay, and bring it in here as an exception. Everything in the 20-some-odd years that they've been doing this, and they've developed exception after exception after exception. I took every dang one of them. And then, Robin, I sat down and added to them. How are you going to deal with capital improvements? You know what they said? Anytime you had a capital improvement over X number of dollars, you had to go to the referendum. Okay? We said, you got $14 million from it. No telling what you got. When we did the final audit this year, probably had another couple of million to it. Because you always, you know, raise more money than you spend, so you put it in reserves. But I thought we were pretty generous. You got $14 million, you got $14 million worth of capital improvements without asking anybody for anything. You go borrow money to make capital improvements. That's what that says. But you got to put the debt amortization in your budget. That's what you do if you were running a business. So what has been presented, it's been out there for a long time, folks. It didn't just hit this table. Your
You
staff,
can summarize, sir. We're over our time. Go ahead.
your staff has thwarted this process at every step. You directed them in August to do something that they haven't done till today.
All right. Thank you, sir.
I presented this so you would have something. It's something that is a lot less than these 1,400 people asked for, but it will work.
Thank you, sir. We're over. You're over. Thank you.
Well,
I've been at it 5 years, Dick. I think I deserve all the time I wanted to speak. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Manning?
Mike Minnick, just like to make a point here that I'm not representing anyone else, I'm representing myself. So I'm not representing the Political Action Committee, I'm representing my ideas. And I'm not about to tell you what to do. A couple things. Number one is, you didn't really hear much from the city manager, but I spoke to him, and he spoke to whoever would speak to you. City attorney said that staff supports the Marco Island. That's not what I was told. Not real sure where you got that, but that's not what I was told by the city manager. Marco Island's the only other one in the state that restricts the ability of the city council to do their own budget. The budget process goes, what, 8, 9 months? You study it very much in depth, as pointed out by Mr. Walker, Councilman Walker. So this last one, I totally disagree with. And you know, you can put all the exceptions you want to in there, but it just doesn't do it. I was interested to hear we and Watch Group, and I represent, who's the Watch Group? The Political Action Committee. A bunch of people that...
Mr. Minnick, you already had 5 minutes in this last.
No.
He's good. He's good. Let him talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Appreciate it. One of the members of the Watch Group. They've got a chairman who doesn't even live in the city or own property in the city. So I find that interesting. Now, the only thing I'd say to you is it started a long time ago, 4 years. I've heard it, been going on 4 years, But as you know, when you came on council, it changed. Because what you really asked for originally wasn't really what you wanted. And you found that out. It's not what we need, and you changed it. I don't agree with restricting the city council's ability to go. I don't think you should sit up here like they did and not listen to the public. But I think it's your responsibility to know what's going on in the city, more than just the regular public. And your responsibility to make the decisions. That's the way I feel. It's the way I said it when the petitions came out. I said no. What you want to do is be involved in your community. Make sure that you get city council members that will listen to what you say and believe in what you say, or not. But at least listen. And that's what happened when the fire assessment fee came out. They didn't listen. And that's why these charter amendments came along right after that, because they wouldn't listen. But now you've got a council elected that does listen. And you should not restrict your ability. The charter says that all power of the city lies with the 7 elected city council members. And that's the way it should be. And if you don't believe that these should go forward, then you shouldn't. I talked to the city manager for a long time. He does not support number 3. He doesn't support really any of them, but that's not his say. So I recommend you talk to him a little bit more before you go forward with number 3. Because it's just really restriction way too much. And you can come up with a whole bunch of exceptions, but Marco Island's not the same. And Marco Island's not the same city. You know the police chief in Marco Island?
I do.
Do you? How big a police force?
There are about 15,000 people, probably about 30 vehicles.
Okay. It's just different. You look at, you say, well, they can do this, so we can do this, but you don't really know what their tax base is. You don't really know anything about their government. I mean, each city is different. And I really honestly believe that that's why we elect city council. For you to learn about your city, to speak with your staff, to understand all of the issues brought forward to you, and make the right decisions for all of your city. All of your city, including your residents and your businesses, but take it into account for all of us.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Smith?
Good afternoon, Scott Smith, Bay Drive, Long Beach. First of all, I understand that it is a very rewarding, thankless job that you're doing. I remember that. And I remember working with the 3 of you on council when I was on council. And speaking of fiscally responsible, I think Mr. Mead was one of the most fiscally responsible in the entire time I was on the council. He was on the council prior to me and currently as well. So the charter amendments, first of all, personal opinion on the charter amendments, I don't agree with constitutional amendments. I think that's what legislation is supposed to do. Same thing with this. Charter amendments, I think this is what the body of the council is for. We elect y'all to do this, to do the things for the city. So particularly the budget amendment, it does appear to be handcuffing the future councils with the budget, obviously. Y'all make the decisions as to how you want the budget to go. That is the actual purpose of what we're doing. Everything you're doing is deciding on spending. The majority of it is all spending money. Now the watch group, as I keep hearing, 1,400 petitions in the watch group of 24,000 people in the city that are voting. I mean, that's like 6%, maybe a little less. You know, so we're here for 6% of putting a charter amendment. 6% of the population, the voting population within the city limits of Fort Walton Beach. That's so where's the other 90-some% that may not want that vote? So I understand the petitioning and whatnot. However, the purpose of the council is for y'all to make the decisions, and y'all continue to make the decisions. You dig into the backgrounds and do that. Don't put this up here and restrict the future of councils. If you're going to have every person would say limit government spending. But the reality is several of y'all run businesses. I run a business myself. But when I was on council, I realized that there's a lot of things that the municipality does that I don't do in business. I can make different decisions in business that I could as a council person, or how a municipality has to run. So, again, charter amendments as a whole, I think they should not be. This one in particular on the budget, I think it is very limiting to the future, and that is not a responsible decision for y'all. That is an irresponsible decision in some regard for y'all to make. So, thank you again for your time.
Thank you, sir. We've got a few minutes left. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Denise Durker, from Prior Road Southeast. You guys may not be familiar with me, but my grandparents moved here in the 40s. My mother was born and raised here, and I've lived here the majority of my life. I came here because I do watch these online, and I see previous councilmen and mayors speak, and I just thought that I should come and speak myself and let you know what the citizens think or what I think. And I hear a lot about representation, and I don't understand why, as council members, you would want to put an amendment forward that limits your ability to represent everyone or anyone. So you were saying earlier, if we felt a certain way, we voted a certain way, we could get the people that we felt represented us into the council to vote a certain way, to approve of a certain budget, or do whatnot. But you're talking about putting forward an amendment that could potentially limit what I would want. I may actually want to see some things improve around Fort Walton Beach, a little more money being spent over here, spent over there, whatever. And we're talking again about, this is a budget. It's not taxing, trying to take more money from people. It's about working with money that we already have, what to do with it. So I just feel like I agree with a lot of what they're saying, that this is a decision for you guys. And going back to Margot Island, too, listening to some of this, I wasn't aware. So they've had this for 20 years. And over 20 years, what it sounds like is they just keep adding exceptions and keep adding exceptions because it's not working, because things keep popping up that don't fit into this tiny little bubble. So they just keep saying, oh, well, we'll just make that an exception, make that an exception. I mean, the list of exceptions is considerable. Yeah. So why bother? And this whole thing was brought up by, a couple thousand people or so that felt one way. But I guarantee you there's a lot of other people that feel a totally different way. And we put that in your hands to make that decision. So, so thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good
Williamson, 211 Dedication Street. And I'm basically just going to do quick bullet statements or either comments, rebuttals, or just my own personal opinion. Canvassing board that Paul was talking, with the canvassing board being on that previously, I can vouch, I was totally shocked that not every box has been filled in when people vote. So it is, they will do what needs to be, and when it gets towards the end, they just kind of leave it off. So if you want the most bang for your buck, I would listen to Paul. The watch group letter and petitions, unfortunately, they were full of inconsistencies and misleading with people voting the way they did. And I can rebut anything that was on those letters that were out there. Also, people not understanding how government, I did not, when I first sat up there on the dais, and there's people still sitting up there that still admit, I am still learning on how this works. So you're wanting to put something out into the public to let them vote on this budget issue, when even some of you yourselves still don't understand it. So I don't understand why you're trying to pass the buck and possibly limit what the staff is able to do. Let's see. Then especially on the budget sitting up there with everyone wanting to keep, every one of you want to keep things as low as possible. Everyone that ever has been up there and will be up there wants to do the best for the people of the city. So everyone wants to keep it, so why pretend or that they want to just escalate it up beyond means and not keep it within what you have promised people to do with keeping it as low as possible. Sorry, I'm phrasing. And then also, if on the compensation for city council, if you obviously don't need it, then donate it, put it up there to the good, but don't hinder somebody else that possibly in the future wants to be a part of the decision making and loves the city just as much as you, but needs that little bit of compensation to help encourage them to get up here and help make the decisions. Then if you don't need it, then donate it, but don't take it away from somebody that possibly does want to fall in love with the city even more. So that's just a few of my opinions. Sorry.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sorry for the nervousness and freezing. I don't freaking say it. I can't say it.
Yes, sir.
Robert Smith. You know, there's a process in the Florida statutes to amend charter. And that was followed by the watch group and the petitions. It was 10%, not 6%, but it was 10% of the regular voters at the time, and that's the petitions that they got. That's what we brought in here. And I think you need to not be talking about and or. You need to be looking at what the petition said as far as limiting the budget. The watch group has gone back and we never intended to stop the city from taking grants or FEMA, or nobody could have anticipated COVID and the American Rescue Funds and all the free money that got doled out. Nobody could have anticipated that because it never happened before. But we tried to come up with exceptions to allow the city to get free money, encourage the city, the police department, the fire department, and go out and get grants, but set a budget. Everybody else has to do it. The Air Force has to do it, the Army has to do it. I mean, everybody has to do it. If this staff can't do it, then get staff that can. I mean, you guys set the budget, and I'm sure they can work within the budget. And this Marco Island is not just the only city. I mean, we brought case law where there are other cities out there that have limitations on it. If you're going to have a capital expenditure over X number of dollars, you have to take it to a referendum. Marco Island's not the only, it's the only one that y'all have researched, but obviously the staff, you gave the staff an hour to get up here and complain about it and say they didn't. I mean, it would have been nice. The watch group should have at least got, since it was their petitions, and this is a workshop to get up here and, you know, represent what they brought here. But the steering committee, we tried to come up with a solution. We know we can't go back to the old numbers because so much has changed, but we can start, you know, we can start here going forward and come up with, this is what the people wanted. The people wanted a limitation. and let's let the people vote. Well, the folks that brought the petitions, but this is still going to referendum. Put it out to a vote. And I think the vote should be in November. You're gonna get the biggest amount of people the opportunity to vote on it, regardless of, you know, when I go to an election, I don't vote for the judges and stuff like that, retaining judges, because I don't know anything about them. But if there's something on the last page that I do know about, I'm gonna go back there and vote for it. But I think it would pass. I think it would pass much higher with a special election, because I know there's 1,400 people would get out and vote. But give everybody a chance. Put it in November and give everybody a chance to at least have it before them. Everybody that goes to vote in the presidential election will at least have the opportunity to vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Alvarado?
No, I was saying it's probably
Yeah.
almost the time.
Yeah. All right, well, we've got a lot of interesting discussion. We're not going to make a motion to select any of these. That will come up at a future council meeting. So I thank everyone for their participation. And we got 5 minutes to go freshen up, and we'll start again. We're adjourned.